Hello, Lynn. It's so lovely to have you on my podcast today. And you are the perfect person to be here because my audience are midlife women who are chasing symptoms and chasing diets, trying to find solutions. And they really want to try low carb or carnivore, and they don't really know how to do it or they don't really understand how to get started. So, you being Midlife Carnivore on YouTube,
Yes.
I'm so excited to have you here to share your knowledge and your experience with my audience. And I would love for you to start by telling me who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, thank you. So happy to be here and glad to see you again since we met in November at Hack Your Health. So, my name is Lynn. I am 57 years old and a wife, mother of three, grandmother of three, almost four. My youngest is expecting her first child. And I live in Washington State. I am a retired nurse, retired because of medical issues. And so I worked in hospital nursing for quite a while and worked under that critical care umbrella. I worked in a step down unit for the ICU. And then I ended up going into outpatient nursing in gastroenterology and hepatology. So I spent the last almost 8 years of my nursing career working in that area. But I ended up with 35 years of undiagnosed symptoms that were very frustrating, took me to 17 different types of doctors, and finally got a diagnosis back in 2022. But at that point, it was kind of too late to save my career because I was so sick and ended up in June of 2022 going on medical leave. So I will get into all the details, but that's kind of the quick version of who I am. And I will definitely say that I do have my YouTube channel, Midlife Carnivore, which I started in May of 2023. And it opened up so many doors for meeting people. As you know, once you get into the carnivore community, suddenly you start meeting these amazing people. And so I did get connected with Healing Humanity, and I'm on the leadership team with Healing Humanity, and I'm super excited working on the documentary and have been filmed and actually am one of the featured people in the documentary. And so that is coming out this year. So there's a lot of wonderful, exciting things going on. I went from being totally disabled to actually having a life. So I'm happy to fill in some of the details as we talk.
Yeah, so I'm so interested to hear more about how you were disabled because when I met you, you were wandering all over the place at Hack Your Health, and I didn't know any of that. So, yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about your symptoms, if you want to share anything about your diagnosis, and really how you were before you found carnivore.
Okay. So I got diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome and a related condition, which is genetic, called hereditary alpha tryptasemia. And I'll explain a little bit more later about what that is, but it is progressive and it gets worse. It's an immune system disease. Now, I started having symptoms in my 20s, and the symptoms were very vague, really severe heat intolerance, pretty severe exercise intolerance, fertility problems. I got diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, but nothing helped. They put me on metformin. It didn't do anything. Looking back, I see the underlying cause was not even being addressed, even though the metformin was trying to help with my insulin. It really wasn't addressing the issue. It ended up affecting me in the area of mental health. I had very severe anxiety. They told me I had depression. They told me I had social anxiety disorder. They told me all sorts of stuff. But I did end up in a psychiatric hospital in my early 30s after years and years of uncontrolled anxiety. And the anxiety for me kind of didn't make a lot of sense, and even the depression didn't make a lot of sense. It was obviously chemical, something going on in my body. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack. Like I'd be sleeping and relaxed, and it's like something in my body would stimulate a panic attack. And so I was working at that point in my first career. I was a corporate accountant, and I just one day walked out. I just told my coworkers, I have to go. I'm sick. I didn't tell them what was going on, but I went to a psychiatric hospital and they ended up admitting me because I just told them I'm going to die. I was convinced that if they didn't help me, I was going to die. No rationale for it at all. Obviously, it's not rational. But I ended up 5 days there, and I ended up in a partial hospitalization program for quite a while, and then several years of a variety of psych medications and seeing different therapists, psychologists. I got misdiagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder, put on lithium, which really messed me up. And it was just this roller coaster of trying to navigate the psych world. I did eventually end up getting stable and getting off of medication. And I was gaining weight through this whole time. I started gaining weight in my early 20s when I started having PCOS symptoms. And so my weight was continuing to escalate over time, but things stabilized a little bit. I was compensating for the weird things like the heat intolerance, the exercise intolerance. Like I would go try to exercise and it would wipe me out for a week and I couldn't do anything. The fatigue was so severe and I just never had any energy at all. But when I got into my late 40s, is when I started having really, really worse symptoms. And so I started having dizzy spells. I started having throat swelling episodes. That was actually a little bit later, maybe in my 50s, but I started having these episodes and I was working in the hospital when the first one hit, where I got really dizzy and my blood pressure shot up, my heart rate shot up. The nurses around me, they quickly checked my vitals and the charge nurse put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me down to the ER, and they did the whole workup, cardiac, stroke workup. Everything was fine. Sent me home with some meclizine for an inner ear. Said, well, it's probably your inner ear. That did nothing for me. And so that kind of started seeing a bunch of doctors. So I saw a neurologist, had MRI of my brain, didn't find anything abnormal, saw a whole bunch of different doctors, rheumatologists, and just a variety. And nobody could answer why this was happening. And then I started having these random throat swelling episodes that would take me to the ER. I'd have to call 911. And it was the same thing. It was the throat swelling, severe tachycardia, stroke level hypertension that would just seem to hit out of the blue. And those were like acute attacks. But at baseline, my everyday functioning was getting worse and worse. I was having a lot of flushing episodes where I would just all of a sudden, I would be like, and I thought maybe it was menopause, but my face would get beet red. Then at work, I would sit next to, like in the break room, sit next to a window when it was sunny. And I would come back from my break and my coworkers would go, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Because I'd have these red blotches all over my face. I started having like heart palpitations. I had severe body pain, even down to my bones. Like even my bones were in pain all the time. And then I started having I couldn't get a deep breath. My bladder would become irritable. It would lose its contents without any warning. So I would just be sitting there and boom, my bladder would empty, which was horrible. I would have horrible gut symptoms as well and get really severe abdominal cramping to where I was doubled over in pain. And it got to the point where every organ system of my body seemed like it was against me. And so I was like, I have no life. I don't know what to do. I was trying to work. And so it really kind of came to a head when I was working. It was during the pandemic. I was very fortunate. I was able to work from home. One of the reasons why, and I was already working from home one day a week, but they sent us all home like in March of 2020. And then when we came back in June, they said, okay, let's get at least one nurse a day to come back in the office and see patients. And so when it was my turn, I went to do patient visits and the heat from my breath from wearing a mask created an anaphylactic reaction. My throat was swelling. I had the tachycardia, the hypertension. I was like, and my boss said, go home. And so I couldn't during the whole pandemic, not that I wanted to wear a mask anyways, and not that I was like a big mask fan, because as a nurse, I knew they don't keep out viruses, but I wanted to go places, but I couldn't because the heat, it wouldn't take very much and my throat would swell from the heat. And so I was pretty much homebound, but I could still help patients. And I was working, doing a lot of triage, doing a lot of on the phone assessment, helping manage patient care. 2022 in the spring, it got to the point where my brain stopped working. And that was where I knew I wasn't safe to work as a nurse anymore, because I was working and I was experiencing every day. I was dizzy. I was experiencing nausea. I would have to take a break because my abdominal cramping would get too severe. I would feel like I was going to pass out. Nobody knew this because I was just behind the scenes over the phone. I was doing telehealth, but not with a video, just audio. But then I would be on the phone with a patient And sometimes these patients were suicidal because these GI patients were sick. I mean, they were sick. And during the pandemic, they were delaying going to the ER. A lot of times they were afraid to go to the ER. And so I would be on the phone with patients that sometimes they were suicidal. And so I could not have my brain freezing. And I was finding that I was slurring words. I couldn't get my words out. I couldn't think. My brain would freeze or the wrong word would come out. And so I'm like, I have to go on medical leave. I had just a few months earlier gotten my diagnosis, and I was hoping that I would start to see some improvement. And so I saw an allergist. He diagnosed me. I had to have a bone marrow biopsy. And not everybody who has mast cell disease has to have a bone marrow biopsy, but I did, unfortunately. But he gave me some medication that, hey, if you're not feeling better in a few months, come back and see me, the typical thing you hear from doctors. And so I just got worse and worse. So I had to go on medical leave. Over the course of a year, I just kept getting worse because I couldn't do anything. The reactions were coming several times a week. I was fortunate that I dove in and I started learning as much as I could about mast activation syndrome. And so I learned some tricks. I found a couple of what I called my rescue meds because I had an EpiPen. I didn't want to have to use it. I really didn't need to use it because it would give me worse tachycardia. But I found a couple of dissolvable medications that would get my symptoms under control when they first started. So my ER visits were going down, but needing to use those rescue meds were 3 or 4 times a week. And the fatigue was so severe that I couldn't do anything but lay around. And so my mobility got to be even worse to where I was just limping. My back was starting to have problems. My knees were having problems. I couldn't go anywhere because I never knew what was going to cause a reaction. And so I could never accept any invitations to do anything. I didn't have the energy. And I also was too afraid to associate with anything. So I'd gotten to the point where I could never accept any invitations to go anywhere. And I didn't want to. I mean, I had the worst rosacea. My rosacea was so terrible, even because my face, I may have sent you pictures. If not, I'll send you pictures. But it just looking, having people staring at me, not only from my morbid obesity, I think the highest I weighed myself was about 350. I stopped weighing myself around then. And I probably got somewhere close to 360 pounds at my top. Um, but it was, yeah, I mean, life was terrible. It was just, I was losing hope in any future because the medications that the doctor gave me really weren't helping much. And all I could see in my future was dependence on my husband. This is kind of TMI, but when you're morbidly obese and you're ill, I could not toilet myself without an assistive device, basically. And I didn't see that improving. And it was mortifying. It was like, yeah, it was just, I had lost hope. I was getting really depressed. And then my husband brought me a video of Amanda from Carnivorous Me sharing her healing from rheumatoid arthritis using a carnivore diet. And I had been on a carnivore diet in the past. I had learned about it and from Mindy Pell's interviewing Paul Saladino. And so I thought it was just weight loss because the topic of this podcast I listened to with them was all about weight loss. So I tried it and I did lose some weight, but then I stopped. And so when he brought me this video and I binge watched her channel, I'm like, wait a minute, this is not just about weight loss. This is about healing. And it's like, she had an autoimmune disease. I have an immune system disease. Maybe this can help me. And so I just decided I'd do it. And I asked him, will you do it with me? And he said, yes. And that was the end of May of 2023. And it has been absolutely life-saving to have the healing. I call the weight loss a happy side effect. From my top weight, I've lost maybe around 160 pounds. Some of it was lost before I started carnivore. I was doing a lot of keto and everything, but from my top weight, it's been about 160 pounds of weight loss. But I just consider that a bonus. It has helped me get my mobility back. But honestly, I was getting my mobility back before I lost a lot of weight because of the pain was gone. The inflammation was gone. And my symptoms started to improve so fast.
I'm so excited to hear that you started in May of 2023 because I started in April of 2023. And we all
Wonderful.
know that Carrie Mann started in March of 2023. So it's like
Yes.
boom, boom, boom. We all started. When he brought you the video to watch, were you all in when you first saw that it was carnivore and it was all meat? Or were you like, what? Ah, that sounds dangerous.
No, because I had done it before. I didn't have those questions. And it's weird because as a gastroenterology nurse, you would think that I would be like, no way, because I was teaching people to have a colorful plate and to make sure they're getting their fiber. But I think maybe because of my experience as a GI nurse with patients, it maybe helped a little bit because I've dealt with thousands of GI patients, and whenever they get the fiber out of their diet, they feel better. And whenever they are in a flare, say a Crohn's flare, or if they have diverticulitis, it's like, okay, the doctors never said eliminate the fiber, but they always would say, well, let's just eat the white stuff. Like, let's eat white bread, saltine crackers, white rice, and just decrease your fiber. And they would feel better. So taking that leap of no fiber, no fruits, no vegetables, no seeds, no nuts, no grains, no nothing, it wasn't like a completely crazy leap for me because I knew that our patients healed when they took those things down out of their diet. And I was always a nurse that questioned things. And so it was just in my nature not to just take what people told me and accept it. To me, it had to be researched and I had to make sure that the data was behind it. And I think that because I had worked through the pandemic, I was already the biggest cynic of everything going on in the world as it was, that anything that sounded crazy, I was not going to discard it. It was like, I'm going to question everything and I'm going to research everything. And if this makes sense to me, I'm not going to throw it out. And so that was where I was at when he came to me with it. Yeah.
Okay, so you said something that I just really started talking about on my podcast, on my YouTube channel, in my interviews. So the idea of weight loss being a side effect of actually taking care of yourself, isn't that a novel concept?
It is.
You know,
It is.
yeah, it's insane. So I'd love to hear that. And then also, you said that you weren't doing this for weight loss, you were doing this for healing. But could you talk about how, I want to say, could you talk about how doctors don't actually ask us what we're eating? Instead, they want to prescribe things and just look at symptoms. So, how did that work for you? And how do you look at it now?
Well, I mean, I knew that weight loss needed to come. I mean, there was no doubt, but I was at the point in my life where I was so disabled and dysfunctional that I would have been happy to stay at my current weight if I felt better. And so, yeah, the weight loss was important, but it wasn't as important to me as healing. I hadn't dove into researching, like, how do you really lose weight? What's the best way? Because I had gone through my life with weight gain and I had tried everything. Like, I gained 25 pounds on Weight Watchers. My body did not want to lose weight. So I had literally lost hope that I could lose weight because everything I tried didn't work. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'll handle weighing this much if I'm not in pain. And if I can get out in the world and function. Okay, no, I didn't fit in any seat. I had to still, wherever we go, I couldn't sit in a booth, had to sit and wanted to have a chair without arms. It was those types of things. Or couldn't go to a little cafe because the chairs were so flimsy for tiny people that I was like, I can't even sit here. That was a reality, of course, but I can navigate that. I had been navigating that for quite a while, but it was weird with all these doctors that I saw. I don't think any of them asked me about my diet. And it was obvious that my diet wasn't good. I was morbidly obese, and I don't think I ever had a doctor actually bring up my weight and say, I'm concerned about your weight. And I know that doctors tend to be careful, but they talk to patients about so many other things. They will deliver a diagnosis if you're dying. That's not good news. Nobody wants to hear that, but they have to. It's part of their responsibility as a doctor to be honest with you. And not one single doctor looking at me, weighing 300, said, I'm concerned about your weight and how it's impacting your health. And I had a doctor who talked to me about it after I brought it up. What he recommended was he referred me to, after, I'd been referred to a dietitian, all of that, but he referred me to a bariatric surgery place. And I did end up going through their whole preliminary, program. You have to go on their diet to show that you can actually be disciplined and lose weight. And I gained 13 pounds on their diet. Bless you. Yeah. So I went through their preliminary program where you have to go on their diet and show that you can lose weight and be disciplined. And I gained 13 pounds on their diet. So they're like, sorry. And I did follow it. It's just my body wanted to gain weight. And I saw their dietitian. I don't remember if it was a nutritionist or a dietitian, but I met with them regularly and we did 6 months of this. And they said, well, you don't qualify. You gained weight. I'm very thankful that I did not. I was going to thinking of having a gastric sleeve, but in the back of my mind, I was like, I know I'm going to be one of those people that gain the weight back. And I also knew that the solution was not cutting out 80% of my stomach, because what was going on systemically. It was going on up here. I did end up going on a medication that helped for about 6 months and then it stopped working. And I they gave me a whole list of other medications. They all had these crazy cardiac side effects. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. So that was my experience with a doctor trying to help me lose weight. But other than that, no one said anything.
So I just think it's so interesting that when you take your animal to the vet, the very first thing I ask you is, what are they eating? But when we go to the doctor, they do not ask us that. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that you would be willing to stay heavy if you didn't have pain, to just live that way would be better than what you were dealing with. Let me ask you tried a lot of diets. I even heard that you tried the zone diet. So I was like, yeah, I did that one too. What do you think you were actually chasing back then? And what did those approaches miss for you?
Good question. So I did do the zone diet when I was in my early 30s and I lost 70 pounds on it. It was not sustainable for me. There was a lot of measuring and it was a part-time job just to plan my food. And I was never one that really enjoyed cooking. I was working, but we were also in the process at that time of adopting. So I went through many fertility treatments. I did artificial insemination 4 times in my 20s. It didn't work. We couldn't afford in vitro. And the doctor did an exploratory laparoscopy to figure out, like, is there something else going on? Didn't find anything. So we ended up adopting our kids. And so we adopted them out of foster care. We went through the FOSADOPT program. So our kids were a little older when we got them. And so I had lost the 70 pounds. And then we got our son. He was 4 at the time. And my attention turned to him. And I couldn't sustain all the work that went into maintaining my diet. And so gradually I started gaining in weight. And then a couple of years later, we got our daughter and she was 5.5 when we got her. And she was a very angry little girl. And they had both been abused in foster care, but he reacted by being super easygoing and compliant. And she was just an angry little girl. And she took a lot of work. And so my diet went completely out the window at that point. And then I ended up in the psychiatric hospital. So I got moments of hope where I would try a different diet, but most of them didn't work at all. Like the zone diet was probably the only one that kind of worked. It was just not sustainable. And I hated chopping vegetables. I couldn't stand that. It's like, oh my gosh, all the prep work and I'm going to eat for 10, 15 minutes and then I got to clean up all this stuff. Some people love that and bless them. Not me. And so I remember one time my husband and I went on this really low fat diet, and I definitely bought into the low fat thing. And this was in the 90s, and we had been on this low fat diet, and then we ended up we were like, we are craving a hamburger. And we went to Carl's Jr., I think it was down in California, and ate this amazing hamburger. And it was the beef. It was like this fatty burger. And my gosh, we still talk about this burger because it was the best tasting thing. Like everything in my body was just happy. And I felt like, but it never dawned on me that it was the fatty meat that I needed. And so that diet failed. I mean, I bought into every diet out there. I tried the cabbage soup diet, I mean, and I just finally gave up. It's like, obviously, my body does not want to lose weight.
So, mast cell activation syndrome. Now, I had that as well, and I did a natural frequency kind of medicine to get rid of it in 4 months. And so I want to know, when you got all these diagnoses and then you were in the depths of it, and then your husband brings you the carnivore idea. So did you do a lot of research before you jumped in? Did you get electrolytes? Did you have Herxheimer or healing crisis or any of that when you got started? Like, tell me about your journey just getting started with carnivore.
Well, since there were two times, there were two journeys. And so the very first time when I did it for weight loss, well, both times I just went cold turkey, which I don't recommend people do, but that's my personality. And the first time I didn't do any electrolytes. One of the reasons why I stopped it is because I was having these leg cramps. And I didn't have any clue that there was even a carnivore community. Like, literally, this one podcast with Mindy Pels and Paul Saladino was all I knew about carnivore. And so I stopped it because these leg cramps were getting to be really bad. And I didn't really experience like a keto flu or anything like that. I never had I mean, I had the transition of, like kind of low energy, but I had low energy anyways. So it didn't really impact me that much. Now, the second time I added the electrolytes and I made sure I was being very well hydrated. And so the second time around, again, I went cold turkey and I didn't have any problems. It was weird. I'm just one of these people that I just didn't really get any keto flu or anything like that. But I do know that a lot of people do get a keto flu. So I don't recommend people do what I did.
Think that people, like, I had mast cell activation syndrome. I didn't know about it. I also had histamine intolerance. So I went cold turkey because I had literally every day that I ate something for 7 months, I had a reaction. So I
Mhm.
just went cold turkey because it just made sense to me. But I'm curious, when you got started, what did you notice? How long did it take you the second time to really feel like it was working, and what was happening?
So within 3 days, my body pain almost completely went away. And also by day 3, my gut pain was gone. And the bloating and that heavy feeling in the gut was gone. And I had occasionally had that wonderful empty feeling, but it was just, I was always chasing it. I had no idea when I would feel that way, why. So I noticed that, oh my goodness, there's that wonderful empty feeling where you can feel thin even when you're not thin. You feel light. And that was by day 3 that I experienced both of those things. So that was telling me that my body was liking this. It was doing something important in my body. Gradually, other symptoms improved, but those were the two that were really, really fast for me.
That's so exciting. How was your mental health as you were going through this?
I felt like it was good. By that time, when I started, I had been doing really well mental health wise. And as far as depression, it was all kind of circumstantial. I feel like I was depressed because of my physical condition. And I didn't look at it like a clinical depression because I'm like, I just kind of felt like anybody in my situation would feel down. If you're disabled and you can't function and you keep having these crazy reactions, of course you're going to be depressed. So I didn't really look at it as something I needed to seek help for. I had learned a bunch of coping strategies when I was dealing with it in the past. So I had gotten pretty mentally resilient at that point in my life. I was 55 when I got diagnosed. Well, no, I was 54 when I got diagnosed. I was 55 when I started carnivore. So I had already had a lot of life experience. So mental health wise, I feel like I was doing pretty well. Occasionally, I would have the anxiety and I'd start to feel the beginnings of a panic attack, but I knew how to get it under control. Now, I don't have that anymore. So if you want to look at mental health from that perspective, I think there's been improvement because I don't have those little, times where I'm like, oh, I feel it coming. Let's deploy my techniques. Let's get it under control. I don't have to even worry about that anymore.
Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night having panic?
No,
Wow.
no.
That must be life changing.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone who's experienced panic attacks, you know how scary they are, and they hit out of nowhere.
Yeah. For my audience, they really are dealing with a lot of symptoms, don't really know. They've been dismissed by doctors, even trainers, people don't listen and they're so frustrated. And I think that they want to do carnivore, but they're a little overwhelmed or they're kind of doing carnivore. So they'll do carnivore and then they'll eat some fruit and they'll eat a little bit of, bread or something else. How does that affect when you're trying to do carnivore and you're trying to do it for healing purposes?
Well, I mean, part of I guess the secret sauce when it comes to carnivore or even keto is being in nutritional ketosis. And, I would definitely recommend for people who are in your audience who are doing that to learn as much as you can about how your body actually works. And not everyone's a crazy science nerd like I am, but I think it does help to have some education on what it takes to be in nutritional ketosis because it's letting your body get to the point where it can be fat adapted, live off of ketones for your fuel, where you're going to be healing yourself. You're healing your mitochondria. We have to realize that when we've been eating the way we've been, the standard American diet for so many years, many of us decades and decades, you have damaged mitochondria. So the absolute battery cells of your body are not producing the energy that you need to sustain your healthy life. So you've got to repair that. If you're insulin resistant, cells are not functioning. They're not running well on glucose. And so you've got to get into nutritional ketosis. You've got to get the ketones up in your system and you've got to get them working to heal your mitochondria. You can't do that if you keep adding stuff that's going to spike your glucose, spike your insulin. And I think part of it is getting over the addiction. And if you never address the fact that you're going to go through withdrawals, you are going to. It's like getting off of another drug. Carbs, sugar, you're going to go through withdrawals. So I always just let people know you have to know that you're going to go through this, but know that it will end and it's going to get easier. Go through the few weeks where it's difficult. Have your strategies, get all that stuff out of your house and connect with the carnivore community and get the support you need because you can get through it. And I can attest, once you get over that hump, it gets so much easier. And one thing that I've done to help myself, and I am an addict, there's no doubt in my mind, I am a carb sugar addict, or I was. I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have employed with myself is I don't allow myself to even look at any of the food that I shouldn't be eating. And you can't help what comes in your field of vision, but you can decide whether you're going to keep looking at it or if you're going to look away. And I choose to look away and that's where you have to realize, what do you have control over for your own self? You can't control what you see. You go to work and there's bagels and cream cheese on the break room table, but you can control whether you look at it, because what happens if you look at it, then your mind starts to justify eating it. And then what would happen with me is I eat something, I'm like, oh, I feel okay. I guess I'm all right with eating this. And then I'd eat another and then another, and the addiction would kick in. And then I may not feel terrible right away, but maybe the next day I wake up with my hips are killing me. My feet, try to get out of bed and I'm like an 80-year-old woman and my feet are killing me. Maybe there's a little gut discomfort, maybe a little nausea, maybe my brain isn't working as well. There's all these symptoms that you need to be in tune with. Like some people think, well, if my stomach doesn't hurt, that must mean my body is handling it. That is one of many ways in which the carbs will impact you. For some people, it just like me, it can be stomach, but man, does it settle in my joints. My joint pain just skyrockets if I have carbs. For you, it may be you get a rash. You may end up getting dizzy. You may end up with heart palpitations. Be in tune with your body and know that your body is going to tell you if it doesn't like something, but just think about your insulin spiking. Whenever you eat that, think about your insulin spiking and you're getting yourself out of ketosis. You're delaying all of the great results when you do that. And I know I'm babbling on and on.
No,
But
you're not. Keep talking. I'd love
I
for you
think
to go
people,
into, can you talk about how glucose spikes and then talk about, like, explain it on simple terms, how the insulin spikes and then what damage is it doing inside the body and what are the repercussions? Because I don't think many women understand the process that happens in our bodies. We think, oh, we just eat the food and it either makes us heavy or it makes us thin. And they aren't thinking about like all of that detailed process that's happening. And if they knew, maybe they would choose differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so obviously any carbohydrate breaks down to glucose. And so I think the first thing people need to realize is you got to redefine sugar. So it's not just sweets that are sugar. Vegetables break down into glucose. Breads break down into glucose. I mean, everything that's a carbohydrate breaks down into glucose. And our bodies have a set capacity for how much glucose can go into our cells. And so when we're constantly feeding, like it's called, chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption, when you're constantly feeding yourself carbohydrates, your pancreas responds. And honestly, when you even think about eating, your pancreas starts producing insulin. You don't have to eat. That's why I don't look at these foods. It's like you can have an insulin spike for more than just eating, thinking about eating. You could have glucose and insulin spike with exercise. There's good reasons why these chemicals spike in your body. But when you're constantly eating carbohydrates, your pancreas is constantly going, okay, I've got to utilize this glucose. One of the jobs of insulin is to open the door for glucose to get into your cells and for your cells to use it to create energy. Once you have too much, your cells just shut down. And they say insulin's like the key, opens the door to let glucose in, and the key lock changes. It's like the key stops working. And so you've got all this insulin floating around, you got all this glucose floating around. Your liver has to find something to do with it. And so it's going to store it in fat. And then your fat cells get too full, and then it has to store it someplace else. So it stores it in your tissues that are not designed to have fat in them. Like your liver is a perfect example. People end up with fatty liver. I could go on and on, but understanding and knowing what you're doing to your body is really important. And getting your insulin down and correcting your insulin resistance is so important. The weight will come off if you can fix yourself metabolically. And that's why I always say that the weight loss for me is a happy side effect, because the focus was on fixing me on a metabolic level, healing my mitochondria. The weight will come off. If you need to gain weight, you will get to the point where your body is at a healthy weight. And this is what's amazing for people. If you need to gain weight, you can gain weight on carnivore. If you need to lose weight, you'll lose weight on carnivore.
So can you tell me what kind of carnivore you eat? Is it fatty? Like, how did you approach what level of fat you were going to take in with carnivore? And could you talk about how fat doesn't make you fat?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it has changed over the course of time. It's been over 2.5 years. And initially, I just ate whatever happened to be carnivore. I completely zoned out on the whole histamine thing. And because I had learned about eating a low histamine diet before I went carnivore, and I was trying to keep my histamines low. Yeah, I learned this on my own. The doctor didn't help at all. I asked him, should I eat a low histamine diet? And he said, oh, you can if you want. And that was it. That was the last time I saw him. I'm like, seriously. But when I started carnivore, I just ate anything carnivore. And then I was noticing that I was getting a certain amount of progress, but it was not enough. And my rosacea was not really healing. And so I ended up going on a low histamine lion diet. I made a video for my channel about eating a low histamine carnivore diet. And when I was making that video, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm eating all of these high histamine carnivore foods, and I'm not being careful with histamine. And so I ended up for probably over a year doing a low histamine lion diet where I was eating pretty much beef, lamb, salt, water. I'd have some coffee, but I do the mold-free, bulletproof brand coffee. Another thing with mast cell activation syndrome, I think it's really important for people to test for mycotoxins and test for heavy metals, because there's more than just food that can impact your mast cells. And so like I did test positive for mycotoxins. I have test positive for stored lead in my tissues. I have other things that I'm working on, but the diet has changed. So I found that with going carnivore, I went from needing my rescue meds 2 to 4 times a week to maybe a couple times a month. But then going on the low histamine lion diet, I stopped needing them. I stopped having those acute reactions. And obviously my skin is not, I don't have rosacea. My skin is clear. The rosacea cleared up, which I really feel is a reflection of the healing that happened in my gut from being on the lion diet. Now, I did eventually start testing some things like bacon. I missed eggs because, egg whites are high histamine. I wasn't doing any baking because it's higher histamine. So I started testing some things out. I started with eating a whole egg, and like I couldn't even eat egg yolks because I would try to separate it. You couldn't get all the whites off, and I would still have reactions even to the little bit of white that was in that. So I added the egg yolks back. Then I'm like, okay, cool, I'm doing good. Then I added the whole egg. Now I can eat bacon and eggs. I can actually eat some fresh pork. There's actually a lot that I can eat, but I have to not eat too much of it. So it's a matter of paying attention to what my body does. Now, I was high fat at the beginning, and I really feel that that was really important for the healing. I have had to vary my fat. I've stopped adding fat now. Like I don't put butter on my steak. And, as you lose weight, the weight loss definitely slows down. So I'm definitely at that point. I still have, I don't know, I think I have maybe 40 pounds to go in getting to a weight that's supposed to be ideal for me. It's very slow now. So I do tend to go a little less on the fat, but I never tell anyone to do what I do because it is so personalized. You have to figure out what's working for you at the stage that you're in, and that is going to change. So I always advise people to be constantly just evaluating where are you at now, what's working, get tapped into the carnivore community so that you can talk to people who've done the journey and can advise you. And it's really important. Our bodies want to achieve a homeostasis. So they want to get to a point where it's like, okay, we're happy with what you're doing and let's just hang out. And which is okay. But if you're looking at losing weight, you're going to have to mix things up a little bit. So I'll vary calories from day to day, the volume. I know people don't like the word calories, but volume from day to day, keep my body guessing. And I do pretty well. The whole time been carnivore, I haven't eaten any plants at all. So my motivation to continue to eat this way is so strong because I actually have a life now.
So, was it hard for you when you did the transition? And then what made you want to do lion diet for a year? Like what idea popped in your head and you were like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And what made you pick the 1 year?
It wasn't really a conscious decision ahead of time. I'm going to do this for 1 year. It was kind of a little bit fear-based because when you're always having to call 911 and have these, life-threatening reactions, to suddenly not have them anymore, it's like, do I even want to change this? Do I even want to risk it? And so it took me that amount of time to work up the courage to test it out because the lion diet, I did it because of the histamine. And I had this awareness through making my histamine video that I needed to go on a much stricter form of carnivore. And so it wasn't like this super conscientious, plan it all in advance type thing. It was awareness that happened as I was educating myself. And of course, I learned about it watching Michaela Peterson and saw what she was doing and was like, okay, obviously, this is what I need to do. And it was very fast. I started to see improvement very fast. I feel like I turned a 90-degree corner. It wasn't a curve. It was like, boom, I was feeling so much better. So I highly recommend anybody who has, anything wrong with their immune system and autoimmune, or if you have histamine issues, is try the lion diet because it will definitely help. But you've got to have fresh meat. You can't be doing, you can't be eating a bunch of leftovers. You have to make sure your meat is fresh.
Yes. I wanted to ask you really quickly because I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, it looks like you froze. I don't know if it's me or you. I think you're coming back.
So let me ask you this. I wanted to ask you, do you still have mast cell activation syndrome?
I get asked that all the time. And I do believe I do. And here's the reason. Because if I eat too much histamine foods, I will start to react again. There's something called histamine tone, and it can take time to improve your histamine tone. That has to do, and it's kind of like mast cell tone too. They call it histamine tone, but it's really the resilience of your mast cells. And it takes time in order to have existing mast cells die out, new mast cells created. Your new mast cells have to be created and enter a safe environment in your body. And so that takes some time for the healing to take place, for your body environment to send out that signal to your mast cells that it's safe. We can be stable and function properly. And so because I'm still detoxing mycotoxins, I have the lead stored in my tissues. I have not yet achieved as much of the tone as I need to. So it's a process. I don't know yet. There's a lot of people who say, you can't cure mast cell activation syndrome. I know you can improve your histamine intolerance, and histamine intolerance is temporary. I mean, if you just have histamine intolerance, it can go away and you can get better. But with mast cell activation syndrome, I think it has to do with how early on you are and how quickly you can stabilize your mast cells. I was decades into having symptoms, and my symptoms got really severe. So I don't know the answer yet as to whether or not it will ever be completely gone. Not that I'm going to go start eating carbs, because my mast cells are only one part of my body. I'm looking at what's best for my entire body. There is not one diet that's going to help one organ, but you need another diet for another organ system. There's one diet that's good for your whole body. It's a process. About 70%, it has to do with diet. The other 25% has to do with your environment. And we can't control what toxins we're exposed to. I mean, I was born in the 60s, so I grew up during that era of lead was in everything. Yeah, we had lead-based paint, we had lead pipes, lead was all over the place, and there weren't the regulations that, were getting the lead out of things. And even now, like, I worked in old hospitals, there's a lot of old buildings that still have a lot of lead in them. So the lead exposure is really common for people that are my age. And so I would say for people who are, and I always address this for people who say, well, I did carnivore and it helped to a certain extent, but then it stopped working. Well, it doesn't mean it's not working. It just means I really believe you need to start looking outside of the realm of diet, because of our environment is so toxic that there's more than just food that impacts you.
I think that it's important to talk about nervous system regulation and how the nervous system, when it feels like it's in a cell danger response, it's going to not really allow your body to work like it's supposed to. And when you actually work on that and calm the nervous system and create safety in the body, then the body will start to do the things that you're trying to get it to do. Now, I would love for you to talk about what a realistic day of eating looks like for you, how you really do carnivore. Let me throw this one in there. So, how you prevent eating, cookies and candy and cake and junk food when you're stressed out? Because a lot of my clients and some of the women in my Facebook group are talking about their temptations and giving into their temptations. So, I'd love for you to speak towards that.
Well, unfortunately, it's super common to be an emotional eater. The first thing I can definitely say is I can give people hope that it's possible. And I think part of the problem is feeling like there is no hope. I mean, so I don't want to trigger anybody, but I will share, right? I was the person who was digging in the trash looking for things, leftover junk food. I was the person who was going out and going through drive-throughs and getting ice cream. And I'd go to like Dairy Queen and I'd get a Blizzard, but then I'd get chicken fingers to balance it out, and and a Diet Coke, But then I'd go through McDonald's and get a McFlurry, and I'd get a couple cheeseburgers. I'd go through Burger King, get a milkshake. Okay. Sometimes multiple at one time. That was me. So, and sometimes it was because my husband and I got in a fight, and I would be needing to vent. So I'm, what I'm saying is I was there. And so I completely understand. I didn't raise two special needs kids that went through abuse and had PTSD without stress. I didn't go through it, caused stress in my marriage. I've been married for 35 years now, going on 36 years. Marriage is hard. I went through mental health issues. I went through physical issues. So the emotional eating, I get it. I've totally been there. So first thing is I want to say there is hope. about a year and a half into eating carnivore, I went to a bunko. It was a substitute in a bunko party where we had played bunko. I realized about halfway through the night that every table had a bowl of candy on it, and I didn't even notice until like halfway through the night. In the past, I would have been the one eating all the candy and it would have been almost gone. Of course, I would have left a few pieces just because I didn't want to look at, be that one that ate the last piece, right? But I would have eaten the vast majority of it. Every time I switched tables, I would have been popping candy in my mouth. And so I never dreamed. And that was a huge moment for me when I realized, oh my goodness, I didn't even notice the candy. Number one, there is hope. You can overcome the emotional thing as far as emotional eating. I really believe that for me, it was a combination of things. First of all, the carnivore diet gave my body the nutrients it needed to regulate my hormones and the neurotransmitters. So from a physiological standpoint, my body was starting to work the way it was supposed to. That was a huge, huge help. So it's not just one thing. It's not like, okay, I've got to have willpower. Okay, none of us have the willpower. We've proven that to ourselves, right? It's not a matter of willpower. But I would definitely say be aware that it's going to be hard at first. Make a decision. Realize what you have control over. You can say no, but I like and I listen to Dr. Sivas a lot because I'm going through the Nutrition Network course, and he's one of the instructors. He has what he calls activity snacks. All right. So, which I like that concept. So you can't just say, I'm not going to go and eat emotionally. You have to choose something you're going to do instead. So whether you journal, whether you go out and take a walk, for me, I crochet, which keeps my hands busy. I'd be aware of the time where you end up doing emotional eating. A lot of times it's in the evening because you're bored or because it's habit. Eat more during the day and then choose something to do in the evening that'll keep your hands busy and get the support. Don't try to do it alone. I am the site administrator, one of the site administrators for healinghumanity.life, which is our membership community for Healing Humanity. We have Monday through Friday, we have a Breaking Addictions group, which I've written the book for. And it's applying the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to eating a carnivore keto diet. And so there's support out there. Anybody can join and do that. But even if you don't go into a paid community, there's free communities out there. Get connected and get support from people. You are not alone. And you can do this.
So I love that. I always tell my clients that they need to have a really strong why, and that they also need to create one thing to work on. Don't try to change
Baby
18
steps.
things. Yeah, it's like 18 things on Friday. They're going to start on Monday, and then they fail at it, and then they think they can't do it. So I tell them, let's pick one main health goal and let's work on one thing to get towards that, because it's going to, like you said, the side effect of weight loss. Well, when you do one small step, it's going to clear up a whole lot of other issues because they're focused on that thing. And that's the main issue.
You can do anything for one day.
Exactly. And you just make it another one day, right? So tell us where we can find you. How can people connect with you?
So I'm in a couple of different places. So I have my channel, Midlife Carnivore, and I'm on YouTube and I'm a little bit on Instagram. I'm not very good at Instagram. I have a few things that I posted, but you can definitely DM me there. I also have a Gmail, midlifecarnivore@gmail.com, but I'm mostly associated with Healing Humanity. And so you can definitely find me every Thursday. I'm on Carrie Mann's Q&A. I'm on the panel for his Q&A on Thursday evenings, which is live. You can come on into the live chat and you can ask questions. And then also, like I said, I'm the site administrator, with Adam Lacey, we're the site administrators for the membership site. If you want to join, healinghumanity.movie has a coupon code if you want to check it out. And there's I think a half off of the first month. The proceeds, the vast majority of the proceeds go to support the documentary project and this series that's coming after the documentary. And so there we have Zoom calls every day except for Saturday. We have Zoom calls. And so I'm not on all of them, but I'm on the main ones, which are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so you can definitely, if you want to come on, I'm on a panel where we do Q&As. We've got a doctor on, or an expert on every Wednesday. And then Thursdays, we have a great call where we just hang out and get to know our members. And so there's a lot of opportunity to connect through there.
That is so exciting. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest today and sharing your story because it is so powerful for other women to hear your story and to be encouraged and to have hope. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, too.
You're welcome.